Hello and welcome to the Vicars Watch Dibley,
the podcast where three priests link our stories to those of a Reverend Geraldine Granger and other TV vicars. I'm Kate.
I'm Jenny.
And I'm Ruthie. This episode we are doing a review of Series 2 of the Vicar of Dibley. We'll be looking at each of the episodes, what happens over the course of the series, the different themes, and finishing with a marvellous little quiz.
Hello everybody.
Hello, Jenny.
Hello.
How are you doing?
Very well, thank you.
Are you excited? Because for all our dear listeners, so that you're aware, this is the last episode we're recording before Jenny gets married.
Oh, that is actually amazing and terrifying. No, it's not terrifying. It's beautiful. Yes, thank you. I am excited.
In fact, I wonder if by the time this comes out, you are probably married by this point.
Yeah, I'll be Jenny Bland.
You'll be a bland vicar.
I shall be a Bland. Yeah.
Reverend Bland.
I know. I think I've already stated like my worry about children in primary school. It's like everybody, the vicar's coming today, Vicar Bland. Everyone's gonna be like, oh no, Reverend Bland.
Not a bland vicar.
No, I'm just teasing. I only say that really to be a silly Billy. I'm actually, I'm really looking forward to. I was going to say becoming one with my husband, B.
Oh,
I mean, under one name, I shall
It's
leave it at that.
It's the night
To become one. That's Alice's
Wow.
like jam, isn't it? For when she gets
Yeah, that's at her wedding, isn't it? Oh,
It's
it
so
comes full
good.
circle. Please tell
Oh.
me you're singing that song as one of
Do
your
you know
hymns
what?
for your
Mm.
wedding. And if you're not,
If
you
only.
need to change it right now.
If only, if only.
And it's really apt that we just talked about that, about Alice and Hugo's wedding, because one of the things we're doing today is we are going to be giving a review of the whole of season 2 of the Vicar of Dibley. But before we begin, what have we been loving this week?
Mm.
Yeah, I mean, all of this is very confusing for us because we are recording way in advance. So I'm still on holiday, but the last time I said that in an episode might have been about 3 weeks ago. So
Because we're also recording out of order, so it's...
yeah, it's all very confusing. So,
So
maybe you just
confusing.
think I've had like a 2-month holiday. I wish. But it's meant that I've been doing lovely, just nice things with family. And today my son is at nursery and I'm just doing odd jobs about the house. And one of the things I've been loving doing as well today is I've just been painting a shed, well, a Wendy house that was very kindly gifted to us, and so there's bits of me that are just blue and I'm in my painting scrubbing things, so poor Jenny and Kate have got quite a view of me, but it's been nice just to do some DIY. Love a bit of DIY, but I am slightly smurfed now.
You're looking very
Blue
creative.
dubba-dee-dubba-die.
Love that song.
What about you, Kate? What's something that you've loved this week?
So the thing I've been loving this week is that on Tuesday I did a communion with my chapter, so that's the other clergy in my deanery. We work as a team and we shared communion together, and I was leading, and I chose a liturgy from the Iona community called the Cayley Communion. Cayley is in the Scottish dance.
Oh.
And it has the most powerful, most beautiful closing responses that I've ever come across, and which are now, I think, my mantra in daily life. And I think these are words which we all need to hear at the moment because life is difficult. So they are. The leader asks the question, is God good? And everyone responds, God is
It's
good.
good.
And then the leader asks, is life worth living? And everyone responds, life is worth living. And then the leader asks, is the best yet to come? And everyone responds, always the best is yet to come. And I think those are just fantastic questions for mental health. Is
Yeah.
life worth living? Yes. Is God good? Yes. Is the best yet to come? Yes, that's what I believe. So yes, that's something that I've been loving this week.
Fabulous.
Oh, that's amazing. Do you know, I feel like every time we do this, one of us says something really profound, and then, like, the others are like, oh my gosh. Because the thing I've been loving this week is literally riding my bike. I went for a bike ride again for the first time in ages, and I was like, I'm just loving riding my bike again. So,
the best.
yeah, it's my little humble offering. But that is what I've really been finding joy in again. I haven't ridden for ages, and I'd forgotten how freeing it was. So that's what I've been loving this week.
Oh, that's ace. And to kind of finish off our opening section before we get into what we're doing for this episode, which Kate is going to explain, inspired by our wonderful chat that we had with Reverend Canon Kate Botley,
Woo!
I'm going to smack out a probably too much information, but we're going to go for it anyway.
I love
I'm a vicar. I have really bad cramps at the moment, and it's horrible.
Oh no!
And I think, have we all been there where,
yes,
like, doubled over at communion thinking, I am in so much pain and I've got to lead a service and it's the worst thing ever. And I just thought I'd mention it because actually there are quite a few people in the world who menstruate, and just to say, we hear you, womb owners, that actually sometimes it's just crap. Am I allowed to say crap on this podcast?
Well, you know what? I'm gonna piggyback onto the same little sharing train. I haven't got to the terrible cramps, but I have terrible PMS at the moment.
Are we synced?
That's premenstrual stress. I think Americans call it PMT. And I've had to keep telling myself loads this past week. It's not the end of the world, it's just your hormones.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Because it feels
They're so
like the end of the
powerful.
world.
They're so powerful.
Because it was one of those things that people were worried about with women getting ordained was, you know, what happens if they're on their period and they're doing the communion? Like,
really?
That seems dirty. That was one of the quotes that came up from it.
And unclean.
Unclean woman.
Wow. Going back to Jewish laws.
Yeah, well... Is it church laws or...
Sorry, the Jewish laws, as in super OT, as in...
Oh my goodness, I just had a flashback to what I think I remember someone saying. I think I remember someone saying, oh, what if a female priest gets her period or she's doing communion and it soaks through her alb?
Really?
I'm sure I just had a flashback to someone saying that. As if you don't know when it's like
well,
imminent.
Well, surprises, but still.
Sometimes.
Yeah.
There are the signs, but there can be things that crop up and you just go...
And also...
Well, you're an unwelcome visitor.
Yeah, exactly. But also, so like that person asks, also, what if your period comes and it soaks through your alb? I once... I hadn't... Actually, no, that's a bit TMI.
Anyway, let's move on. Yeah. Let's talk about what we're doing today. We did this when we finished all the episodes for season 1, and it feels like yesterday when we did it.
Yeah, it does.
Because season 2 only has 4 episodes, and that's sort of why we've bulked it up with some other stuff. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about season 2 as an overview, some of the themes which we've picked out, and kind of overarching narratives. Things that we loved the most about this season, and maybe some things which we found a bit more difficult.
Yeah.
So, do you want to...
Should we go through it?
A quick whistle-stop tour.
A quick whistle-stop tour.
Whistle-stop.
Whistle-stop. Well, I'll kick us off. Season 2 starts, of course, with episode 1, which is engagement. Arguably, I think sometimes known as one of the best and most favourite or most loved episodes of the Vicar of Dibley. Could just be me thinking that. But we see Alice and Hugo, I guess, kind of failing to act on their mutual attraction and love for one another. And so Geraldine decides that she's going to step in and help these two lovebirds to become one. And I think we have a very successful meeting of lips in the study in the vicarage, which you may remember.
Oh, yes.
Everyone's super happy about this, apart from one, and that one, of course, is David. He is absolutely gutted that Hugo is planning to ask Alice to marry him. He even threatens to disinherit him. But then another, of course, a huge storyline going on in this episode is that Owen confesses to Geraldine he's never even had so much as a kiss. She feels sorry for him. They have a little snog-a-log themselves. And he ends up proposing to her as well.
Ugh.
She is absolutely gutted about this. Well, she's not gutted. Actually, no, she is, isn't she, really? Because it throws
She's
a bit...
disgusted by it.
It's a massive pastoral burp, and she's like, what shall I do? Luckily, things turn around in her favour after she's had a couple of bevies. That's Owen's a major no-no for him. So we have their disappointing love story, but for Alice and Hugo, this is their engagement, and it's lovely. Lovely way to start season 2.
Yeah. And from that episode, we then move on to episode which is called Dibley Live, where they set up a radio station for a week because it is the 650th anniversary of St Barnabas Church being open. And so we have all these different radio shows going on, and it's an episode where Alice is trying to get in with the in-laws, isn't she? And she's trying to prove herself to David that she isn't completely stupid as he thinks. We have some classic faux pas with the radio, which is amazing and embarrassing. We have the beautiful moment where Frank comes out on the radio, which is unfortunately missed by most of the community, other than Geraldine, but he is able to come out as a gay man on the radio, which is just beautiful. And then we finish the episode with Alice taking on David in the brain of Dibley and absolutely trouncing him. Where she knows who lives in Horton Manor with David Horton, and it's Hugo. And so we have a very special episode there as well.
Lovely. Then we come on to season 2, episode 3, Celebrity Vicar, which is all about Geraldine's rise to fame in the public eye. So following on the success of the radio show, which Ruthie's just told us about, Geraldine is then invited to participate in more public media. I think she goes on into the Times newspaper. She does an episode of Pause for Thought with Terry Wogan, even though she's absolutely sure that her media career is over. And basically it kind of rolls on and on. Now, interestingly, when she does her Pause for Thought, you might remember that she meets a beautiful Darcy Bustle, which is how this episode kind of turns itself around. But as more and more opportunities for Geraldine come in to talk about herself, really, or be a vicar in media. I think there's even a lads magazine that get in touch. She does some risky photo shoots, all of that. And unfortunately, all the fame goes to her head with, in the end, unfortunate consequences for the other villagers who accidentally get named in the press with their foibles printed in bold all over the tabloid. It's very sad. They're incredibly humiliated, and Geraldine's career, she realises, and I think within herself, everything just comes tumbling down. She's left mourning after one of the parish council meetings and just thinking, how on earth am I going to make this right? And then, of course, Alice has a wonderful idea. And Darcy Bustle comes. They have a wonderful dance at
The gala.
It's the Valentine's Gala. Yeah, the Valentine's Gala. And things are all made right as she humbles herself, makes herself look a little bit silly. Again, a beautiful episode. And luckily, things are all made right by this show of, humility, I suppose.
Yes, and because we did that episode, we got to meet our own celebrity vicar, didn't we, as part of the series, which was just wonderful to chat to her. And I've been praying for celebrities regularly since.
Oh, I love that.
So
well done,
that's
you.
been great.
Yeah.
And it's good that Geraldine's made up mostly with the rest of the village because it's time for a wedding. And woohoo! It's the episode Love and Marriage, which is the wedding of Hugo and Alice. And it all gets a bit dicey at various points. And at the beginning, Geraldine is potentially heading off somewhere else and is wondering about leaving Dibley. But no, we go through with it. We see all the wedding plans, and David is not happy about the wedding dress and various things. And Geraldine ends up being a bit of a peacekeeper between families in order to get the wedding to happen. On Alice's hen do, we have the shocking revelation that she is David Horton's daughter biologically, and Geraldine is very worried. And the
No one
gates
would
of hell
know
are opening
until the first child is born.
with webbed toes. But luckily, the morning of the wedding, we discover it's a different David Horton, and so the wedding goes ahead with only a small hiccup. No, there's many hiccups. There's the interruption to say that the groom is already married to only
yes.
Oh, sorry, wrong church. We forget the rings and we use hula hoops instead. And but in the end, they get married. Geraldine announces she's leaving and going to Liverpool because we meet Simon, who is a key factor
Foxy
in the next
Simon.
series. Yes, but then she decides she's not going to Liverpool eventually. Spoiler for the next one. But we get Hugo and Alice married and off they go on their honeymoon. Whistle stop tour. We probably could have done it faster, but, you know, that was what's going on.
A few laybys.
A few laybys. But what was actually going on in all that, Kate?
Yeah, so our overarching narrative for this season fairly clearly has been Alice and Hugo's relationship. In episode 1, they finally move from their decades of tiptoeing around each other to actually get together, get engaged, and start to mature and grow up. And we see that throughout those middle 2 episodes in Dibley Live. They are starting, you know, Alice is trying to show that actually she isn't as vapid and
good word.
empty-headed as David Horton seems to think she is. Obviously, Hugo stands up to David. We have Alice maturing with how she, at the end of Celebrity Vicar, counsels Geraldine.
Oh, yeah.
And
such a nice moment.
Yeah, and then Alice and Hugo getting married and moving into that next stage of life. But also David Horton maturing as well. So we've got that narrative, and then perhaps a secondary narrative, which is then more to do with Geraldine herself as she comes to terms with who she is. If season 1 was about Geraldine proving herself as a woman in ministry and saying, I'm your vicar, and I'm good at this, you should accept me, then season 2 is leaving her in this space of really starting to explore, so what does it actually mean for me to be a vicar? And we see some of her interests, some of her character traits come through. Which kind of leads us, I think, into favourite moments, because I think some of my favourite moments of this season are those glimpses into Geraldine's character, which we get, like her entering the curly whirly contest.
Yeah, that's good.
And
Yeah,
there's just a greater sense of her being content with who she is in this place.
Yeah,
begin
that's
with.
true. I have 2 moments that I would like to talk about as favourite moments. One more sensible than the other. It's got to be Frank coming out on the
Obviously,
radio.
yeah,
That's
definitely.
just such a lovely, beautiful moment. And yes, we discussed this in the episode that we think it would be played slightly different if it was filmed today. But the changing emotions on Jerry's face on the sofa as she's like shocked and then softens and is just so lovely to witness. And so Frank's had this chance to come out and it's beautiful, and you just see the changes that he has over the rest of the series. You see him start to dress a bit more flamboyantly, which might be a bit of a cliche, but there we go. And he's just able to express himself a bit more. And I think in later episodes, I'm trying to remember ahead, he becomes more clear about his own sexuality and is more open with people as opposed to the secret way that he does it over the radio. But I just love that moment and I think it's ace.
He's a winner.
Have you got a sincere one, Jenny?
Well, yeah, I think my favourite moment, I know it's a bit of a classic, I've already hinted already, but it's got to be the moment of engagement between Hugo and Alice, how he makes her sit down and she has no idea what's coming whatsoever. We know in the background there's been this whole kerfuffle between David and Hugo, and yet he stands up, like you said, Caitlin, to David. He holds his integrity and he asks Alice, you know, oh, I just found this image of him like offering. He's like, oh, here's all my heart. Do you want it? And she's like, yes, I do. And she thinks he's gonna quote some, what is it, an alien film? And then it just pops out of nowhere, and it's just so beautiful. And in this whole episode, we have a whirlwind. That's why it's a favourite, I think, because we literally see the beginning of their actual relationship, and it blossoms straight into being like, yes, this is forever. This is absolutely two people being like, yay, we found another person that we want to, I don't know, do life with. And it's so beautiful. So I think, yeah, that proposal scene is my favourite from this series.
Oh, that is lovely. It's a series with lots of really good bits. I think there's some down bits as well that I'm just like, crack on. Which I would say for the majority of Celebrity Vicar is how I feel about that episode.
It's a difficult one. Yeah, it's hard to watch.
But saying that, one of my favourite moments from the series is from that episode, because I cry with laughter every time I see it, and that is Jim performing in the garden.
You are right! Yes! That is so true.
Every time, I love it so much, and I laugh, and it's just brilliant. And
you're right.
I would,
best scene of all time. Best scene of all time.
So good.
Yeah.
And just the quick change where he pulls off his thong and has his hat in the way to protect his modesty
so
is
good.
just the number of practices he must have done in order to get that right. So that's another favourite moment from the series.
Really good one.
Yeah, and I think there's so many of those memorable moments that when we think of a Vicar of Dibley, they seem to come from this season. So Alice and her interview question, which is if you could meet any fictional character, which Womble would it be? Which is just... And I really like Curly Wellies because they're very, 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 very good with sausages. Like, you have those one-liners, and I wonder if, as I've been reflecting on this season, I think I've said Dibley Live may be one of my favourite episodes, but I think what I like most about this season is more those one-off moments than any full episode.
Yeah, I can see that. But me and Jenny are just romantics, aren't we? So we're like,
big
we like the
softies.
engagement and the marriage.
Yeah, definitely.
The one with the kissing.
So true. Oh, and I love it when there's like quite an extreme plot twist or a major thing happens, yet the characters stay so true to who they are. So like Alice hasn't got a clue about the engagement, and then it suddenly all gets taken away from her when Geraldine comes in with found something for my newsletter. Verger to wed Hugo. They think it says Toad, don't they? Verger Toad Hugo Horton, or Verger to wed Hugo. And she's like, he's a true married. And it's like Frank, when he's doing his striptease for the full Monty, he's still totally Frank. And it makes it hilarious, because by season 2...
Hold on. It's Jim
Jim! I'm so sorry, Jim!
As much as we would love to see Frank doing a striptease, because there's a waistcoat, there's a bow tie, there's a shirt, there's a jacket, there's probably a vest under there, and with Frank, that's probably going to take a few hours to get through with a monologue in between. But no.
Sorry,
he'd explain where he got each piece of clothing.
That's true.
And he's noticed my unusual mole growing.
True.
I went to the doctor about this.
I think Frank strikes me as someone who would take something off and then fold it neatly. He wouldn't be a take and toss it out into the congregation, to the audience.
Or he'd do it it would be like taking off a robe and he's got another like full clothing on.
Yeah, true.
Yeah.
Just a
a bit like Barney from How I Met Your Mother wearing a full suit to bed.
Yeah.
Oh
man, that's a great tangent. Thank you for that one, Jenny.
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome. What I was going to say though, just very quickly, is that like now we know the characters, it's even more hilarious because you know their personality so well. It's almost like they're friends. So when these things happen, you're like, whoa, properly invested.
Yeah.
So let's think about some of the big changes between season 1 and season 2. Let's hold a minute of silence, please, or at least a few seconds, for the loss of Letitia Cropley.
Yeah.
The biggest change from season 1 to season 2. We lost her in the Easter Bunny episode between seasons.
Yeah.
May she rest in peace and rise again.
And rise in glory.
Amen.
But a minute's silence doesn't quite work for podcasting.
No, it doesn't quite work for audio.
Can you
format.
imagine what she would do for the gala? She would have an amazing act. Although
She's the one who would have done the striptease.
Yeah. She
would
would have had a
done
burlesque.
the dance of fans or whatever.
The 7 veils.
Yeah, the 7 veils.
Anyway, I'm showing a bit too much knowledge of striptease.
Yeah. I would have loved to have had an episode with her. This is a bit off tangent, but I would have loved to have seen a comic relief special, which was Great British Bake Off with Letitia Cropley.
Oh, yeah.
That'd have been great.
That would have been amazing.
Yeah.
And it just writes itself.
Yeah. Because that's what she would have done in the radio, wasn't it? She would have done
yeah.
recipes and said on the radio her different recipes and that kind of thing. But yes, we now no longer have Letitia Cropley with us, and so we carry on the season without her. Yeah. Which means there's a lot less women. It's the main focus becomes then on Geraldine and Alice, and then it's just Geraldine dealing with the boys at the parish council all the time, which she's more than up to as the task. But actually, it would have been interesting to see more of that male-female dynamic.
Because we also do get less Geraldine and Alice as the series progresses. And we'll talk about that a little bit later, I think. Yeah. And I think we see Hugo and Alice growing up.
Sort of.
Maybe. Sort of. But there is that sense of they become dependent on each other rather than Hugo being dependent on David and Alice being dependent on Geraldine.
Yeah.
Potentially.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. And there's the kind of main tension from season 1 about Geraldine being a woman is it's not completely gone. It's still there to an extent, and there are inappropriate jokes made at her expense and that kind of thing about her femininity and womanhood. But it's less of an issue, so we can get on with some of the other things to deal with.
Yeah. It's more background noise rather than being the foghorn it was blaring out in season 1. That's how I would describe it.
That's a good, I like that way of describing it. It's good. So we've talked about the kind of main changes between season 1 and season 2. And what we did in our last review episode was talk over some of the themes that we think are kind of picked out over this season. And I think it's clear to me and Jenny especially that Kate is much better at analysing than we are. And so we'll leave her to last because she's done proper thinking and analysis.
Only because I did a degree in this sort of thinking.
So she's good at it.
She's trained for it.
She's trained and ready for this moment. So the first kind of overarching theme of this series is, I think, Jane Austen. There's a huge influence of Jane Austen and her writing and her style that comes in to this series. From the kind of love and engagement, which actually tends to always happen at the end of the Jane Austen novel, but and then onto the wedding. But there's also lots of juicy bits of gossip from the ton to add in, and there's misunderstandings and mistakes, and people read things the wrong way, which is often quite a prominent theme in Jane Austen's writing. And there's just a lot of romance and love in this, which Jane writes about a lot. And so I think that's one of the key things that happens over this series.
Yeah, there's things to do with reputation, which is another really key theme in Regency writing. And there's just a lot of the wording of the way things are said, whether that's in the romantic scenarios or the objections which are being raised, which just feels like you could put the way those phrases unchanged into a BBC adaptation of one of Austen's books.
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly. I'm here for it. I love it. It's great. All of that thing being added in.
Well, do you think that's what makes, or one of the reasons why The Vicar of Dibley was such a successful series? Because it has, links, and it would transpose so easily to, to what we see and what we're used to perhaps in her literature. Do you think that's one of the reasons why it was so likeable and maybe even familiar for people?
I think one of the things that Jane Austen writes about is true life, and it's the life and world that she knows. And so, likewise, in Vicar of Dibley, it's not exactly true life, but it's got enough that you can grasp onto it as stuff that you would know and recognise as part of the Church of England if you have a vague idea of it.
Yeah.
I think for me that if the writers are being intentional about echoing and referring to Austen in the way that we're receiving it, then for me the purpose is to help us understand and to frame Alice and Hugo's relationship. So we're supposed to be seeing this as a classic, timeless, beautiful, perfect relationship. They're formed for each other. You know, this is our Jane and Mr. Bingley, right? Where they are facing problems, but it's always obvious right from the beginning that they're going to end up together.
Yeah.
And I think for me, that's, if it's intentional, that's the purpose of all these echoes and parallels.
Yeah. And it's just, I mean, Geraldine's a romantic as well in all of this, and she clearly loves the books because it talks about sense and sensibility later on in one of the episodes, doesn't it? In where we meet the delicious Harry as part of it.
Oh, yeah, true.
I just think that's something that runs through this whole series, and the juicy misunderstandings and people being authentic to who they truly are, and not pushing people away, but kind of standing firm by that when they recognise what they want to be or who they want to be or who they want to be with. Like in Persuasion, when Anne Elliot has been persuaded previously, spoiler by the way, to give up the person that she loves, actually by the end of it she's like, nope, this is my person, this is definitely who I pick, and you are not going to persuade me from this anyway. And in the same way that I think Hugo goes, nope, it's Alice.
And we also need to remember that this season was filmed, I think, very much in that heyday of the BBC adaptation of Austen. So the BBC Pride and Prejudice was released in 1995, which is the year after this. But in terms of media literacy and what the audience at the time would be familiar with, I feel like there was, but I can't remember being before, but it must have been a bit more, like, do we think people would have picked up on these Austen references? Or would you need to be as geeky about Austen as we are to read into it?
I think you'd need to be as geeky as you guys are, because I would never have picked up on it. But I think I would have said something like, it is the classic love story where you think it's not going to work, but eventually the hero, like one of the, either the male or the female is the hero, and they decide they are going to fight for love, and they're not going to let anything dissuade them. Like, it is the classic love story, isn't it? Where it's like meant to be, oh, but they can't. Oh, but they have. Yay! Yeah. Like, that is it? It's beyond Austen. It's not beyond Austen, but I mean, it's Austen and every love story in a way, isn't it?
And it's not so much about sex for Alice and Hugo. I think, I mean, that is a factor, and that becomes definitely a factor with their dozens and dozens of children that appears. But it's about companionship and, you know, finding someone who you feel comfortable with. Yeah. And I think, well, the sex stuff is implied in Jane Austen in different ways, but I feel like if this series was done today, it wouldn't be raunchier, but it'd be more explicit, that kind of thing. And, you know, Alice and Hugo clearly fancy each other, and come here, Mr. Moist, and all this kind of stuff. But it's a lot more innocent, and, you know, saved for the wedding day, you kind of presume.
Yeah, definitely. I think that leads us on really to another kind of like another main arc of season 2, which is obviously the focus on love, relationship. So we have Alice and Hugo falling in love, then we see their engagement. At the end of the series, they're married. But we also have a lot of other things. We've mentioned about Frank, who comes out as gay. But we also know that he's currently single. I don't think we get a snapshot into Jim's life, but we know that he is married, but that's, I guess, kind of a bit separate. Obviously, but I guess another big focus is, of course, Geraldine and her singleness, to a degree, kind of, because it's just held in comparison to the main love story between Alice and Hugo that's happening. Of course, we could talk about that with Owen as well, and then this time of intimacy that erupts between them, but it's very quickly quelled.
And I think that what we see happening with Geraldine is incredibly real when the person that you are closest to in terms of friendship suddenly pairs off and all their time is then focused on the relationship. You become so much more aware of your own singleness. So Geraldine, as much as she has encouraged Alice and Hugo's relationship and she is their cheerleader, she's also experiencing the loss of her closest confidant. Alice, who was always around at her house and still sort of is, but now Alice even says to her, "You're not interesting to me anymore."
Yeah. Not a good move, Alice.
And I think this is a catalyst for what I think becomes what we all think of as a defining characteristic of Geraldine, which is almost her hunger for a relationship. It's not that it wasn't present before, because we do see that a little bit with her flirting, but it feels like after this moment and with the final episode of this season, we see a bit more desperation, because I feel like she's more aware of her singleness.
The way she acts with Simon is
that's the thing. I think that's motivated by the fact that suddenly there is an attractive, eligible man.
But she wasn't as like that with Tristan.
Sorry, two at the same time.
No, so maybe because she wasn't like that with Tristan, she does a little kind of
she was
snogging
snogging the bloody mirror.
But not to the same degree.
Like, she plans to move for Simon, doesn't she? After not even going on a date or anything like that, and just having him be.
I hadn't thought of it like that.
And she dyes her hair for him.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is it just because she likes him more? No. Have you ever before? Like,
I think it's a combination of factors. It's because there is that nature of her which is flirty, and she's probably always got a little bit of an eye out for someone who she can potentially be a match with. But I do think there's a sense of one of her closest friends, at least in parish, is getting married, and here comes along this tall, handsome man who seems to like her, and she gets a bit carried away because I think she feels the pressure of her friend's marriage.
Interesting. Yeah, I never thought of it like that.
Have you ever experienced this? Is it just me?
No, I agree, and I think it's going back to Austen again for a second. It's like the handsome rogue that if you've read some, you think you're a bad news story from the beginning, but people are freer with them, like Wickham and other characters like that you kind of, people get more flirty with them because they're aware of their situation and go like, I think Lizzie is a bit more forward with Wickham because she knows what's going on with Jane, and Jane is her closest friend, and she's suddenly not going to have that companion anymore. And I think that's the case with Geraldine as well, that she just bites at this man who is not that attractive really. Well, not my type, might be yours. And yeah, so she's foolish and ridiculous for someone who has shown minimal interest.
And again, in comparison to in season 1, where you have Tristan and you have Daniel Frobisher, those are the two quote-unquote love interests, right, of season 1. You've got Tristan, who she gets a crush on, and she does obsess a little bit over him, but not to the same degree. Like, she doesn't go as far as to suddenly say, I'm moving to London or whatever, or I'm going to call him. She thinks about calling him, but then it doesn't quite pan out. She kind of is limited in, she says, there's a potential snogging situation, but she doesn't go out of her way in the way that she does with Simon. And the same with Daniel Frobisher. Actually, she is confident. She is in charge.
Oh.
She's saying this is a flirtation and that's all it is, but I'm going to enjoy the flirtation. Whereas when by the time we've reached with Simon, she is... got to dye my hair, got to become the woman that he will be attracted to. Got to change myself so that he will like me.
He's gross. I'm not looking forward to having more of him next series.
But, well, think of it this way. Once we've talked about him, then we get to move on to Harry, and then we get to do a kind of blind date with all of them, and we'll review each of the love interests kind of as a group and compare.
Great idea. Simon will be bottom. Spoiler for my list. Oh, what about other themes? I think, Kate, you've got one more for us to delve into.
So, as we've touched on, we've been talking about singleness and marriage and those changes. And we talked about how the Hortons are changing and evolving and maturing. I think what we see with Geraldine is a really interesting story happening, which potentially we only as clergy see it because we're in similar situations, and I do wonder if the average watcher would pick up on this. But I'd like to suggest that if one of the main tensions or challenges for Geraldine in season 1 was the outside opposition to who she was, and she had to prove herself, then in season 2, it's an interior problem that arises. So let me explain that. At the end of season 1, as we enter season 2, it's less of an issue that Geraldine is female. People have accepted her and she is feeling quite comfortable and confident. But then there's all these changes happening around her. She loses her closest confidant, who potentially was someone who would keep her in check a bit more. I think potentially she would feel, because Alice is such a naive person, that she needs to tread gently around her. We've also lost the greatest opposition and greatest criticism, so she's not having that criticism thrown at her, so perhaps she starts being less cautious with herself. And I think what we see is a transition of her strengths start to become some of her weaknesses. And this is particularly evident in Celebrity Vicar, where in Dibley Live we saw her use her media savviness to support the village and build up the village, but then in Celebrity Vicar we see that transform into ego and losing sight of the people that she's serving. It stops being about building up her community and becomes building up herself. And I think this is something, it reminds me of what Kate Botley was saying in terms of who she's called to be and who she's made to be. But there is that shadow self of our strengths, where our greatest strengths, left unchecked and unmonitored, can become our greatest failings as well.
Definitely.
Yeah. I think this kind of theme, in some ways, I'm paralleling with kind of ministry for us, as season 1 is a bit like being a curate and season 2 is like when you become an incumbent. I'll explain that a bit better, I hope. So when you're a curate, which is when you're doing your kind of like internship, learning on the job, I personally found myself kind of dulling down a bit of who Ruthie is and a bit of my shine in order to toe the line in different places, because you're second in command and you're not even that a lot of the time, but actually there's something about towing the line and just trying to work out who you are and making sure you don't get in too much trouble, and then being able to get into that place where you can become a vicar and an incumbent. And then when you get to becoming a vicar somewhere, suddenly you're the person responsible for it all, and the pressure's suddenly on you, and you're like, oh flipping heck, I don't know what I'm doing. But actually there's a freeingness of that as well, in that you are now the person in charge, and you call the shots in different ways. And so I wonder if there's a bit of that with Geraldine as well in these series, that you know, at the beginning she's towing the line a little bit in order to get the community to trust her and go, actually women vicars are all right. And in this next season she becomes more herself, which is wonderful and beautiful, but sometimes it goes too far and she needs to work out and rein that back in. What do you think, or am I just talking absolute nonsense?
Yeah, no, that resonates with me a lot, actually. I think, I see what you're saying in terms of curacy and incumbency, but I also see how you're putting that onto the Vicar of Dibley. And it's interesting because I wouldn't have really thought about it that deeply had it not been for our podcasting. So it is really interesting to think about. And I think it's quite a privilege to see in a way, because although, like you said, strengths unchecked can become weaknesses, I also think that actually we see Geraldine become really comfortable, and it's a part of her flourishing as well. It's just like you say, that shadow side that obviously we see go awry.
Yeah.
I think it's actually something we all experience in ministry to a greater or lesser degree, in a cycle perhaps.
Oh,
because
yeah.
ministry feels like constant ups and downs of times where it feels like everyone is against you. It feels like you're facing lots of problems coming from outside sources. You know, X has jumped up, Y has jumped up, and so is talking behind my back, and blah blah blah. And when you're in those situations and it feels like you're being watched perhaps, and you're being monitored and you're being criticised, I think you become maybe a bit more vigilant in yourself. Perhaps you rely more on prayer, I don't know. But then but those times pass, and then things settle down, the water's still, then things can become too comfortable because no one is challenging you, no one is questioning you, and no one's keeping you in check, and perhaps you become a bit complacent or lazy in your prayer life, or with your admin, and things go unchecked, and then suddenly there's a big hullabaloo about something, and you're back into that storm time of things cropping up, and then actually perhaps if things are going well with your prayer life, perhaps things can start to be put back in order. But I don't know, I just feel like that's a very normal up and down in ministry.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Maybe I've just exposed myself.
No, I definitely resonates with me. I'd be interested to see what you think, Ruthie. And it makes me think how grateful I am for the team around me that do hold me accountable, like especially my spiritual director, who I can be like completely honest with and know that that's safe with him, but actually, you know, that he'll reflect back. What do you think, Ruth?
I agree, and I think one of the key things you've talked about there is about talking to God through it all, whether that's prayer or but also kind of discerning with others, and when you're struggling to pray or work out what God might be saying about stuff, actually chatting to others is the really key thing in that. And we can become so self-reliant in stuff and just say, you know, we've got this, we're cool, we're great. And I think that's what Jerry does a bit in that Celebrity Vicar episode. It's all about her, and she kind of forgets to do the God stuff in part of it as well. And that's the most important thing to do. And we can sound very pious saying all of this, but the truth is we all balls it up at this bit, and we all forget the praying bit, or you know, things are going great and then suddenly something hits the fan, and then we're like, oh God, probably ought to talk to you about this.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
We are. Well, I'm assuming we are, but I think we probably all are guilty of that kind of thing.
100%,
And it's...
So I think what we're trying to say is it's normal to have those ups and downs in ministry. It's actually really nice to see that in life.
Yeah.
And it's nice to see that represented, where Geraldine isn't constantly the perfect priest. But the way she's not the perfect priest changes. She's not a static being, a static character, whereas potentially, if we think back to the episodes we did around season 1, we talked about Father Ted a little bit as well. I feel like Father Ted's failings, they're a bit more static with those clergy. It's Jack has problems with drink and women. Father Ted has problems with money and ego, and Dougal just
Is Dougal.
empty-headed, right? Whereas for Geraldine, there's some very complex layers as she shifts and she grows. And as she grows as a person, so do her problems change as well.
I was going to ask you and all that when you were saying about the perfect priest. I was going to go, well, who is the perfect priest? And then went, oh yeah, it's Jesus.
Yeah.
Whoops.
Yeah.
Forgot that one.
But I think it would be so easy on TV to create a perfect priest character. Or perhaps, I mean, if we think about other TV vicars, potentially like Father Brown, because a focus in Father Brown, which is crime solving series based on a series of books, the focus there is on the murders and solving the mysteries. Father Brown as a priest is quite... He's always doing the right thing, you know, under criticism of his bishop, but he's always doing the right thing, and at some point we'll talk about him at a later time. But yeah.
I think we're far more interesting with our flaws, aren't we?
Yeah, and more realistic as well.
Yeah.
Mm.
I think a perfect priest on TV would really negatively play into a stereotype and an image, which is already sort of, we try and pretend is there, but we all know it's not because what's splashed about in the papers and things like that, which is, you know, obviously horrifying when those things come out. But actually, it's what I love about the Vicar of Dibley and I love about this season is that Geraldine Granger is a vicar and she's a normal woman, and she balances those two things beautifully because she gets it wrong and because she's redeemed, like because she's forgiven. So she's still a leader, but she also completely gets it wrong. And the thing she came most to do is, you know, to love her people, to serve them, to show them who God is, and you know, to be their parish priest. She does royally mess up in a way, but she also comes through and there's forgiveness, and you know, and what's great as well is that it doesn't affect how they see her. You know, it's that whole they're able to move on, and it's brilliant.
Yeah, and you know what? I complained at the end of the Celebrity Vicar episode, and I said it didn't feel like Geraldine had properly made amends to the community. But you know what? I think that's right. That's a right decision to have made, because real life isn't like that. You don't tie things in nice little packages of, that's the end of that problem, we solved it, we made complete amends, it's never going to come back. Actually, real life, these sort of things keep coming up again. You can never actually properly, fully heal hurt you've caused. You have to live with it, and you make amends through continued actions, through ongoing love, because only Jesus can properly fix things, right?
Amen. Yeah.
Amen.
Yeah, good way of putting it. I like that. Interesting that you've you've done a 180 on that. That's actually really encouraging to hear. I like that a lot, Kate. So I wanted to go out with season 2 on a little bang. So I wanted to put you two, the nerds of this podcast, with love, to...
It just means that we're passionate about things we love. It's not an insult.
Oh my goodness, no, by no means. Bang.
Yeah.
I wanted to put you two to the test and give you a quick fire 6-question quiz.
Okay.
And dear listener, I'm expecting you to scream out the answers as well if you know them. See if you are worthy of joining the podcast, and see if your nerd knowledge can beat Kate and or Ruthie.
I feel we've been pitted against each other quite a lot.
Because I love a competition. I absolutely love... Yeah, because you have such polar opinions. I know. I've had some great discussions with members of my parish about the Mr. Collins episode and the divide that there was. I'm sorry, Caitlin, a lot of people are feeling rage against him. One of my lady friends in the parish, she said, why are we giving Mr. Collins credit for doing his job. I think one of the things we said about Mr. Collins is, he's going around his parish, he knows it really well. And she was like, that's his job!
No, but
and I was like,
the point was to say,
interesting.
the implication was that he wasn't doing a good job at being a priest. And I was saying, no, he is doing his job. Because you were implying that all he does is suck up to Lady Catherine all day.
We
What was
need
I
to
saying?
take a time
No,
out of this.
he goes around his parish. He
We're never
actually
gonna-
visits people. He does his job. And I think we give him credit for that, because otherwise he's cast as a complete villain.
But that's
Yeah.
the
I
the
will
problem
die
is,
on
the
this
problem is
hill.
his
that
only
Mr.
saving
Collins
grace
is
is that he does his
flawed.
job.
Mr. Collins is flawed, and he's not good at his job, but he does do
At least
his
he does
job.
it. But it is
Let's give him
hashtag
credit for that.
bare minimum. Hashtag bare min. Well,
Yeah,
the debate
but-
is what I love is that we've got two very strong sides. And actually,
Strong
we give
side.
a breadth of space for people to hash out their feelings.
Mr.
about
Collins, round
and
2.
Gibbons.
Another episode.
Let's go.
So, Jenny, how do you want to do this quiz?
Yeah.
Do you want to ask us the
I
questions?
want
we'll stay
you-
silent and write our answers? Or is it like a buzzing in?
Is it going to be a
And then we'll give the
buzz-in?
answers at the end.
There's going to be a buzz-in, and I'm going to ask you to
Do I
pick an
need a
animal
buzzer?
noise.
Wait,
you
wait,
need an
wait.
animal noise.
Or we could use reactions on Zoom, because we're recording over Zoom.
We could do, but for the benefit of our listeners, I'd like you to pick an animal noise, please.
Can I be an eagle?
Yes, if you can just tell me what the noise will
I've got
be.
quite a sore throat. So it's gonna go, we're going, ah!
Okay, eagle for Ruthie with an.
I'd choose a sheep, but if you're kind of doing an I can't really do a because that's
Oh, why don't you
Too
do a
similar.
bat and I'll do a moo?
okay.
I'll be a cat.
Okay,
Moo.
okay. I really hope that I'm able to discern
I
who
hope this
calls who.
works.
I really hate this type of quiz, by the way, because my brain always goes blank. So
Don't worry,
Anyway.
don't be nervous, don't be nervous. These questions
down,
are a
okay.
mixture. They're a mixture between super hard, super easy, and like, did you notice that really one random thing? Okay, you ready?
Okay. Yes.
Mhm.
Moo.
The moo and the bar go head to head. Question number 1. In Celebrity Vicar, who is Geraldine mistaken for when she is a guest on Terry Wogan's Pause for Thought?
Moo.
Ruthie.
Is it Alison Moyet?
It is!
Oh, yes!
A two-fingered clap for you.
Thank
Okay,
you.
1 point to the moo. Question number 2.
Okay.
During season 2, episode 1, when Owen kissed the vicar, what did he leave in her mouth?
But is
Caitlin.
it chewing gum?
Moo.
I'm afraid that answer is incorrect. I'm going to go over to Ruthie.
Is it a bit of pork?
It is a bit of pork. It's a little bit of pork. Okay, a bit of pork.
Chewing
Okay.
gum would be nicer.
It would be
Not sure.
so much better. So much better. Yeah, I think it's sucked out a bit of pork that was in there for like 2 weeks or something. Absolutely
Yeah.
gross. Let's not dwell. Question number 3. In season 2, episode 4, Alice and Hugo are married, as we've been celebrating. But who is Hugo's best man?
But so the person standing next to Hugo is Jim. Is he the
Correct!
best- no, but is he the best man or just the person who's holding the rings?
No, he is the best
I'm
man.
going to
yeah.
go with best man. I'm going
Okay.
to go with best man. Well done,
Okay,
Caitlin. A point
well
to you. My two-fingered clap.
Good job.
Okay, it's all hotting up for question 4. In season 2, episode 2, Geraldine Granger, as we know, goes on Terry Wogan's Pause for Thought. But can you remember one nickname that Geraldine gives to Terry?
But she calls him Tezza. I mean, not to his face, but she does call him Tezza.
I will accept it. Correct. Oh, it's 2-all. It's 2-all. Getting excited. Okay, question number 5 of 6. This is a tough one, ladies, okay? In season 2, episode 3, Hugo appears in the Valentine's Day gala. And as we spoke about this because it didn't play in the BBC iPlayer replay of this episode, but we know it happens. We talked about it in the script. He recites a song for Alice, which he calls Item. But what is the name of that song?
Oh.
And I've got a clue. If you're both struggling.
Mm.
But what is the name of that song? I'm going to give you a 7-second countdown.
Well, that's not a clue for the
That's
song.
not a clue.
No, I'm giving you 7 seconds to count before. I mean, to think. Sorry, before I
No,
You-
I need
Oh
the
no,
clue.
wait, I mean,
Do you need the clue? Oh, okay.
Let's not have 7 seconds of empty airtime.
I'd have really appreciated the silence, but that's me. Okay. My clue is I'm gonna lead you right up into the title of the song. See if it tipples off your memory. He dedicated item to lovers everywhere, and particularly to the woman I love. I bless the day I found you. I want my arms around you, now and forever. No?
No, is it that?
Now and forever.
Be
Ruthie, I'm going to
mine?
hustle you.
Move,
So
be
close.
mine?
I appreciate your
But
answer, but I'm
only
afraid.
you.
Only you? Is it only you?
I don't know, but that was just a guess that could work.
I'm afraid you're both so close, but not correct. It's Let It Be Me. I bless the day I found you. I want my arms around you, now and forever. Let it be me. To which Alice responds, oh, nice.
Oh,
So I'm afraid no one got a point for that.
but that makes
It was a
this
really hard one, but that
a
makes...
tiebreaker.
Yeah. Okay, gird thy loins, my sisters. Gird thy
I'm
loins.
girded.
In season 2, episode 3, Geraldine roots around in her box of goodies for a gift that will be good enough for the best act at the gala to win. She pulls out a record and talks about an embarrassing quote on the back. Can you remember who the artist is of that
Boo!
record?
It's Black Sabbath!
It is Black Sabbath! Oh, the passion. Ruthie, you just clipped it. You are Nerd Alert winner of
Thank
season
you.
2 of Jenny's Very Strange Questions.
Thank you, Black Sabbath. I dedicate my victory to you. That was a good quiz and a great competitor.
Oh, it was very modest. Well done.
So I think we can all agree that Mr. Collins is the worst, as I won the quiz. We hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Vicars Watch Dibley. Thank you to Toby for editing our ramblings.
Any views expressed in this podcast are our own and don't necessarily represent those of the Church of England or any other organisations with which we are affiliated.
And as always, bless you for listening.
So Disneyland Paris decided to join in with all of the excitement surrounding the Women's Euros this year. So in their park, they put together a football team with their princesses. But Cinderella was the only one to be excluded from the lineup. Johnson, do you know why?
Because she couldn't get on the ball.
Because she was always running away from the ball.
That's really
Very
good.
good.
That's
Very
so good.
That's tailor-made for Ruthie.
It's coming home. It's coming